Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this December 21st, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's Pacific time on First Amendment. They play it Monday through Friday, and they also play the show at 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. But if you can't get it there, go to my long-standing website at arcticbeacon.com. That's arcticbeacon.com. And you can get shows going back over a decade regarding what I call the Vatican-led New World Order. Okay, let's start out today with the Jesuit quote of the day. And this is from Lord Palmerston. Now, I bet you don't know who Lord Palmerston is. Let me tell you. He was a British statesman who served twice as Prime Minister of England in the mid-19th century. And he had this to say about our friends, the Jesuits, and I put that in quotes. The presence of the Jesuits in any country, Romanist or Protestant, is likely to breed social disturbance. Okay, well put, Lord Palmerston. And you know, I mentioned the other day, it's really interesting that if you go back 100 years or so, or even more, you'll find a lot of notable statesmen and all over the world were speaking out against the Jesuits. And we know they've been, forcibly kicked out of over 80 countries throughout their history since they were formed in the mid-1500s. But as we move into the 20th century, and even to this day, you don't hear any of these top people in Russia, China, all over Europe, America, say one bad word about them. And I thought about that, and I think what's happening is once we understand that their goal is to create a one-world government, a one-world order, I believe they have these people working for them now, and they work together. And so they're not going to say one bad thing about the Jesuits. We have a Jesuit Pope. They're not going to say one bad thing about their educational system. And to me, it shows that they've taken over most of the world through the Vatican's concordats, the Jesuit schooling. They're known here in America as the great educators. We're going to talk a little bit about that later in the show. But let me tell you what I've planned today. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about a website started by a man by the name of James Arndt, or better known as James Japan, because he spent a lot of his life in Japan. And he has a pretty good website regarding a lot of Vatican information, a lot of things we talk about on this show. And I've always looking for people who understand what we're talking about here and try to find out what their ideas are. And so I went to his website and I found a number of different articles that are quite interesting. And what I wanted to do is feature those articles. One is regarding, he did a little commentary on Tony Alamo's article called The Pope's Secrets. And then he did a little bit of a review of Tupper Saucy's book, Rulers of Evil. So I want to touch on those two things. But first, let me go to this petition and update everybody. First of all, I want to thank all the hundreds of people who have signed this petition. And I want to read one of the comments. And let me just give you a rundown. For those of you who don't know what happened, this ministry is a Christian ministry. And they've been targeted for more than 40 years by U.S. government agencies, including but not limited to the FBI, BATF, CIA, and IRS. FBI informants have come forward with sworn testimony. They were hired to frame Pastor Alamo for his biblical and political views. And this sworn testimony was not allowed in his 2008 criminal trial for violations of the Mann Act, in which close examination of trial and appeal documents indicate a miscarriage of justice of the worst degree. Now, I've been covering this story for years and have looked at every side of it. I've got to know Tony, and when I first got to know him, I wanted to find out if all these things the media was saying about him were true, and I find out, no, it was a media campaign along with these government agencies to close down this ministry because of their criticism of the Vatican and their political statements. They passed out literature all over the world to basically alert people of what this one world order is all about, this new world order, and how the Vatican and the Jesuits play a huge role. And over the years, he's helped so many people, and they had to get rid of him. And it's been a concerted effort for over 40 years. And the last thing they did was they raided one of their ministries in Falk, Arkansas, came with guns a-blazing, and there were like 6 or 7 girls on a swing, and little girls playing on a swing, and they frightened them to death. And what they did outside is that the media depicted this group as a cult and orchestrated this media campaign. That night when they raided, this story was all over ABC News, CBS, all over the big newspapers. And people's minds were being brainwashed by this. I took it upon myself at the time, when this first happened, to call Falk, Arkansas. And I had a number of people, and we made a whole bunch of calls to all the businesses and people, businesses there. And we asked them, what do you think about this ministry? They echoed to a T every word that I heard on the nightly news. And what I'm getting at is this media campaign seems to be why a lot of people, when I'm doing this petition, I get a lot of people on this petition, but I've gotten emails stating, well, if I put my name on this petition, I'm going to be targeted, and I'm afraid to do that. And I said, what are you afraid of? The world's going to be targeted anyway. You have to stand for something. Well, I do believe Tony was framed in this ministry. All these kids should go back home, but I don't want to put my name down. Think about this. On this petition, your name, you don't even have to show your name on it. It'll be on the back side. So when I present it to the pardon attorney, along with a very detailed writ to ask for a complete pardon or at least commutations. But since Tony's 82 years old, I want to get a complete pardon. Now, you got to see what's happening in the last days of the Obama administration. And I hope Trump's pardon attorney will listen to this. And what I want to tell all the people who signed the petition and those who are thinking about signing it, that we're going to end up taking a trip to Washington to present this. And at the same time, I have an attorney friend that's helping me with it, and I'm not sure if I'm going to see if we get him involved, if that'll help us. And I want to talk to some people at the ministry before I do that, and to see what the best road is here. But I do want to make a little bit of a media splash in Washington when we present this. And I'm working on how to do that right now. So please get behind. If you believe everything, I'm going to get to Obama in a second here, what he's doing right now with his pardons. It's very interesting. But first I want to mention this. If you look at what's really happening here, you're hearing every day on the news, radical Islam is terrorizing the world and they want to destroy Christianity. And people, I just listened to the Fox News, which I have to listen to kind of present a halfway intelligent argument here to let you know what they're saying compared to what the truth is. And when I say that, I mean that. They don't give you this story for a reason, because both the left and the right are controlled. And they give you the views of the conservatives against the liberals, and now we're going to have this big, huge chaos going on with Trump being elected. There's supposedly 150,000 women are coming to his inauguration to protest. Why? Who's organizing this? So, in effect, he's having a hard time even getting Hollywood, any entertainers, to perform at his inauguration. Just recently, he was a friend of Andrea Bocelli, the great tenor from Italy. I love his voice. He met with Trump and was going to sing at his inauguration, but apparently he's backed out because of pressure from the left. He's afraid maybe he's not going to get any jobs. So this is how they operate. What kind of country is this? It's turning into a third world Venezuela. But what I'm getting at with Obama and these pardons, if you want to see this, I think we have a better, no chance with Obama, but we'll have a better chance with the Trump administration. And we will get some, I want to get some, publicity when we do go to Washington to present this, because I want to present it by hand and not say, not through the mails. I want to talk to a few people there so we can get this organized. So that's in the works. But secondly, Obama has pardoned more people than any other, probably all the presidents combined in the last 50 years. It's amazing how many. There's thousands of commutations. And I think George Bush only pardoned 3 people. I think Obama's totally pardoned over 300. I might be a little bit wrong in that figure, but there's over 1,700 commutations. And it's not only people that have these minor drug charges. It's 3 or 4 guys with weapons charges, selling heroin and guns, and he's letting some of these people go free. And while I'm sure there's a lot of innocent people who are sitting in jail like Tony. So we're going to make the point that if you believe Christians are being persecuted, now we've done stories about what's happening in Nigeria with John Levy, an attorney friend of mine, who represents some freedom fighting groups in Africa. And right now there's millions of Christians being surrounded by Muslims in Nigeria who control the country. And they're set up for the slaughter, for the genocide. Now it's interesting, if you look, I was thinking about this political climate in our country. Okay? Let me explain it to you. It makes a lot of sense to me, and tell me if you think I'm off base. But if you're looking at the world right now, let's look at Germany, England, France, Italy, America, and let's look at what's happening. Now we have Obama, who has opened the floodgates, has really destroyed our reputation overseas, dealing with dictators like Castro and others, while ignoring Israel. He's basically a leader that's come in to usher in all of these terrorists that are, these Muslims coming into our country. And he's now been voted out by the middle class in America, who see this as a destruction of the United States. So now they've laid the groundwork for ISIS to grow. They fomented ISIS. They created ISIS. And now we got this huge problem here. Now, if you look at all these other countries, that's what Merkel in Germany just did. There was another, whether it's a false flag or a terrorist attack just the other day. Merkel has allowed, because she works for the Pope, and their whole idea is to create this chaos, this war on terror. She's allowed over 1.2 million refugees coming in from Syria and what have you, and they're not helping Christians get out. In fact, a couple Christians I've talked to in Nigeria stated that they don't even go to the refugee camps because they're afraid they'll get killed there, because they're run by Muslims. So they're being rounded up for the slaughter. So Merkel, what is she doing? The same thing Obama's doing. The same thing Renzi did in Italy. The same thing the leader in France did. The leader in England. Now the Brexit vote showed that people are doing the same thing there as they're doing here. So they've allowed for the last 10 years all of these countries to foment terrorism, bring in all these Muslims, and now all these people are going to be voted out. Merkel will be gone in the next election coming up. Renzi is already gone. And the same thing's going to happen in France, and England's already happened in here. So now what do we have? We have this backlash. And what are they doing? They're creating this chaos and the battle. They create the problem. Now they're going to solve it. But are they really going to solve it? They're only going to solve it for their own advantage. And what that advantage is control. Control. And exactly how they're going to do it, but just mark my words. you're going to see a crackdown on a lot of things. Your freedoms are going to go away. All of a sudden, they're talking about all these internet sites that must be shut down because, that's fake news. Anything that doesn't, the Pope came out and said, don't cover the scandals. Don't do this. Just to write about nice things. He even said, if the scandals are true, you shouldn't cover them. And anybody that does this is an acrophiliac or whatever he calls it. I always mix that word up. But it means you have a penchant to like feces. So he calls you a crap eater. I mean, this is unprecedented, and that's just one area. It'll happen in banking. It's going to happen in, increased controls on the borders. It's going to be a control situation because they've created this problem now. Now they're going to get all the people that created it out, like Obama, Merkel, Renzi, the anti-Brexit movement is now, Brexit's taking over in Italy, and they all want to now fight against this. So now they create the problem, now they're going to create a supposed solution. But it's only going to mean a synthesis that's going to work for them. So that's my take on it. Now, if you don't, there was a guy named Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Now, he wrote a book called a book regarding Islamic terror, and he's considered an expert. And he speaks on Fox News as an analyst. He's met with Trump, etc. And he said something yesterday that it bears repeating again today. He says this. He said, like World War I and World War II, the battle lines were drawn. You knew who you were fighting. You knew that where the battle lines were. But now in this war on terror, the battle lines are when you step out the door, when you go to the mall, when you go to your church. And basically what he's saying is frightening, really, isn't it? Those that got to worry every time you step out the door. And just think about that. And that's what they're doing. They're creating this climate of fear, and they're supposedly going to correct it. Well, let's see what happens. Okay, so I wanted to get that out of the way. So back to this petition, and I wanted to talk about this a minute. So I said what my plans are, and you can find it at freetonyalamo.com, and then in the upper left-hand corner you'll see petition. Click on that, takes you to the petition site, easy to sign it, and that'll really help. And what I want to do is read you can put comments too, and there are many comments talking about every aspect of this case. Some people who knew about it, or people who have been researching, or people who are actually involved in it. So it's very interesting to pull all this together. Okay, here's one from Rita P. from Georgia, and she says this: it's criminal and even Bolshevistic what the American government did to this man, and worse, what they did to his congregation. The federal government, without warning, raided the church and took children away from their parents and put them in government offices overnight. Young children, some never saw their parents again. Some families that managed to get away were hunted down on expressways, and their children pulled away and taken out of their cars. This action is so un-American. Why? Well, let me explain why. I've done it very simply. The Jesuit, Vatican-led New World Order does not want to be exposed. Now, she goes on to say, do the American people have the freedom of speech? I say this: yes, you have freedom of speech, as long as you don't criticize the Pope of Rome, the head of this whole New World Order organization. Now, she goes on to say, this man was doing nothing but preaching and doing good deeds around the world. What threat did he cause to America but to teach the gospel of Christ? I hope President Trump will hear his case and release him from prison. Well, that's what we're trying to do, and hopefully that will occur. Okay, let me see if I can find one more here. Okay, let's see here. I'm sure I can. Here's Eric S. from Texas. I was a cop for almost 17 years before I had to retire due to my service-connected injuries I incurred while serving in the Army in Iraq and Afghanistan. I retired medically out of the Army with almost 20 years of service. What you're doing to this pastor seems very wrong by the evidence I was shown. All the charges, come on. Were you afraid of this pastor really? It just seems like you were afraid that none of the charges would stick, so you charged him with all, hoping that one would stick. The testimony of the FBI agents that were saying they were forced to frame the pastor. This is the... Yes, and I've spoken to a couple of them, and they've basically tell the whole story, and they weren't allowed to testify at the trial. So he goes on, to me, all this adds up to a possible workup to bring someone down that wasn't liked by someone, or his mere person threatened someone, and they wanted him out of the way. It could be a number of things. Another is he knew something or someone, and they could discredit him by having him brought up. Etc. From what I see, this pastor was railroaded all the way and should be released. All right, so I wanted to get a couple of those in, and in the few minutes we have in this half hour, I'm going to get to that website in the next half hour and a whole bunch of other things, if I can squeeze in some things I want to talk about regarding, I might do this, I'm going to bring Bert Krantz on tomorrow from the Alamo Ministry. But Friday I want to do something quite interesting. Someone sent me an article he wrote. He said, what if Jesus lived today? What would he encounter? So I want to read that to you. It's pretty well done. But anyway, we got a minute here. So in the second half hour, I want to talk a little bit about the Pope secrets that James Arndt on his website wrote about Tony, and then also a little bit about Tupper Saucy's book, Rulers of Evil. He did a little review on that. I want to talk about that because I knew both these people, and both were framed by the Jesuits. Exactly. And let's see. Here's something here. Let me read this real quick while we got about 2 minutes. So let me do this. Read another one. This one's from, who's this from? I don't know yet. I got to look. Greg, get this. George O. from Kenya. Okay, let's read what they said about him in Kenya. This is about Tony on the website. Hi, Evangelist Tony Alamo. Thanks for your kind message. We'll be praying for our pastor, Tony, and all our members. He's helped us so much. I would like to congratulate you for the literature you have been sent to me. In fact, they have been helpful, and this is not his first language, I don't think. And though there's some of the lost souls have come to Christ already, it's my prayers always towards you regarding the situation, you so that the Lord may intervene and rely and get you out of prison. And that place is bad enough. We want you to get out. Keep up sending the Alamo literatures all over Africa. Thank you, your brother in Christ, Pastor George. Oh, okay. Oh, here's one from Zambia. I got time for this. Yeah, the ministry is still sending out brochures all over the world. And this is Samson from Zambia. Says, sirs, please, I'm a pastor, Samson Tucker of Zambia, Africa. I'm here by forwarding petition to you regarding the great soldier of Christ, Pastor Alamo, to be set free because he did not commit any of these crimes. Yours for Christ, Samson. Okay. So we get a lot of people from all over the world signing this. And again, go to it. It's at freetonyalamo.com. There's a website we started about him in this. And then you go to the top left and click on the petition button, and it'll take you to the petition site. When that's a very simple process of signing up, and it will really help when we go to Washington, D.C. next year and present this to the pardon attorney. And I'm working on that after the holidays, or after Christmas and Hanukkah. I don't like this holidays, so we again can say Christmas. Okay, back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this December 21st, 2016 day on our calendar. And like I said, I want to go to this website right now. It's called, you can find it at jamesjpn.net. And it exposes the Jesuit Roman Popery New World Order. And his real name is James Arndt. And I'm always looking for new websites, people that I haven't really talked about this subject with, and he seems to, I have not read the whole site. So if you go there and you find things that are disagreeable, I am just picking out a couple articles that I've seen so far, and I haven't checked out everything because there's a lot of articles on there, and many of them look pretty good. But I have to say I have not read the whole thing, so I'm not endorsing the website, just saying go to it and check it out for yourself. Although I do endorse a couple of the articles he's written here, and we'll pursue the rest of the website because there's a lot on it. He's got a nice list here of books exposing the Vatican and Jesuits, some that I haven't heard of. So go there, and you'll see a list of books that you can get. Okay, that'll be interesting. I may want to pick a couple of those up. But James was born in Chicago, Illinois. Well, we have something in common, so was I. And served in the Air Force from 1970 in San Antonio, Texas, and other places. And he went to Osaka, Japan, and was honorably discharged in 1974. He became a full-time missionary for Christ, served in Russia, China, and Japan for 44 years, and counting. Lives by faith in God's supply with no fixed job or income. Okay. Now, here we go. He wrote an article. He picked up, I guess he saw one of my shows or something, and he wrote an article about Tony's Pope's secrets. So I thought we'd get into that because it really does get to the bottom of who these people are. And he says, is the Pope the super boss of all government agencies as well as the Vatican? Now, he wrote this on March 31st, 2015, so it's not long ago. And he says, these are excerpts from the Pope's Secrets. The author, Tony Alamo, has been heavily persecuted by government agencies because of his exposure of the Vatican and Jesuit-led New World Order. The Vatican is posing as Snow White, says, now this is from Tony's article, but the Bible says that she is a prostitute, the great whore, a cult, Revelations 19:2. She uses government agency branches in every country, including the United States, as her vicious little dwarfs. The more power and control she gets in government, the more she will fade away in the background in her Snow White disguise, so that the government will be used and blamed for all her evil deeds. And the reason? To enforce laws that harass, malign, destroy, and censor everyone, and every idea that is not Roman Catholic, so she can sit as the satanic queen, the big whore. Because of her age-old desire to control the world governments and church, the serpent-like Vatican has infested the world and the U.S. government with so many of her zealous, high-trained, and dedicated Jesuit devotees that she now controls the United Nations, which she created, the White House, Congress, every state and federal civic and social government agency, including the U.S. Department of Labor, the IRS, the FBI, the Supreme Court, judicial systems, the armed forces, state, federal, and other police. Also, the international banking and Federal Reserve systems. This is called the Illuminati, as we know, the labor unions, the mafia, and most of the heavyweight news media. Now, let me say something. When I speak to some of my buddies in Italy, still, because I spent 7 years in Rome, it's very clear, not only did I read articles about the Vatican's connection to the mafia, but actually saw it close up and talked to people who were involved in this or who knew people involved. So this is real. They work together. And you know, I've been telling you for 10 years how the heavyweight news media in this country is controlled by them. Now, I started out as a mainstream journalist and found out the hard way. So it's personal experience. I also found out the hard way about the control of the alternative media. Guys like Alex Jones and others. Now, back to Tony's article. This cult, the Vatican, says Tony, is very close to replacing our U.S. Constitution with their one-world satanic canon laws of death to the heretic, anyone that is not Roman Catholic. General Lafayette, President George Washington's most respected aide and general, prophetically stated, if the liberties of the American people are ever destroyed, they will fall by the hand of the Roman Catholic cult's clergy. And today we see the climax of detailed plans given in excerpts from a speech given nearly 50 years ago in Australia by Roman Catholic Archbishop Gilroy. And Gilroy said this, quote, the Roman Catholic model is ourselves alone for fellow Roman Catholics. We must defeat all heretics, non-Roman Catholics, at the ballot box. The Holy Father states that negative tactics are fatal. The demands of the Holy Father, the Pope, are that the public services should be 100% Roman Catholic soon. Care must be taken that no suspicion may be raised when Roman Catholics are secretly given more government jobs than Protestants, Jews, and other heretics. Close quote. Now, let me mention this. I've checked out each administration for the last, I don't know, ever since Nixon. And it is filled, most agencies, filled with Jesuits, Roman Catholics, people in the Knights of Malta, you name it. People out of Georgetown, others, that they control our diplomatic corps because they've started the School of Foreign Service, and most of our diplomats come from there. And it's a long laundry list of those who are beholden to Rome. Now, what gets even worse is even now Protestants who have now sold out to Rome, are involved as well, because the ecumenical movement is nothing more than a way to bring everyone under the umbrella of the Pope. Now, back to Tony's article. He says, multi-millions of people have been slaughtered by the Vatican. Thus saith the Lord in Revelations 18:24. History bears record to this fact. During the Roman Catholic Inquisition in Europe, 68 million people were tortured, maimed, and murdered by this huge sect. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre accounted for the butchering of as many as 100,000 Protestants. President Abraham Lincoln blamed the papacy for the Civil War in these words. And the only reason, and I've done some research on this. I'm talking now, this is Greg. I've done some research on this. And my question was, why Abraham Lincoln knew of the Vatican involvement, but why didn't he ever really go public? Well, he may have if they didn't kill him. But one of the things he was concerned about was this bloodbath that they created in the Civil War, and the Pope was behind the South. Was how many people were? It was an amazing bloodbath, and if he would have gone public at that particular time, he was worried that there would have been another bloodbath over religion. And so they got to him. Who knows what would have happened if he'd have lived longer. But he said this is Lincoln speaking, this war would never have been possible without the sinister and secretive influence of the Jesuits. We owe it to Popery that we now see our land reddened with blood of her noblest sons. He then added, I'm for liberty of conscience in its noblest, broadest, and highest sense, but I cannot give liberty of conscience to the Pope and to his followers, the Papists, so long as they tell me, through all their councils, theologians, and canon laws, that their conscience orders them to burn my wife, strangle my children, and cut my throat when they find the opportunity. Now, because of Lincoln's many exposés of the Vatican, he was put to death just as he foretold. Yes, assassinated by the Jesuits under Rome's instructions. The Vatican hasn't changed since Mr. Lincoln's time. Now, and that's a good article. Now, he says go to Arctic Beacon. There's an article that I wrote about that 2000 raid at the ministry, so he's put that in there. Thank you for that. And he's got a couple of my links on there to get this story. So, anyway, he's also got one to Alamo Ministries about JFK's fatal mistake, another article that Tony wrote. So thank you, James, for that. And it's nice to see other people spreading this word. And I'll keep looking for more. But what I want to get at now is, let's see, where are we at? Okay, I have about 15 minutes. So I want to turn to another article that James wrote. This was on April 3rd, 2014. And in this article, he also does give he has my audio of the interview I did, the one remaining. I did 3 with Tupper, and 2 were destroyed by the controlled opposition radio station I worked for before I came to First Amendment. But he also put that link. No, he's got the whole interview I did with Tupper there, so you can get that from him. Thank you for that again. But he says this. He does a book report, Rulers of Evil, and he says, and that's the book Tupper wrote, and I want to see what James had to say about it, and I think we should refresh our memory about Tupper's book, The Useful Knowledge About Governing Bodies by Tupper Saucy. Now, James goes on to say, this book has key pieces to the puzzle of how the Vatican has taken over the world through the Knights Templars, Illuminati, Jesuits, Freemasons, Knights of Malta, Rosicrucians, and other secret groups. Yes, folks, these groups are all connected with the center being Rome, the Vatican. All roads lead to Rome, as true today as it ever was. Now, I may say this. Go to my show yesterday, and I talked about this. I talked about how we can prove not only did the Vatican create Islam, but that the Roman Empire exists today and the Vatican has taken over. Now, back to James. I deem the author Frederick Tupper Saucy to be a good, honest researcher because he is a Christian who has pointed consistently throughout his book that the rulers of evil have sought to negate the doctrines from the Old and New Testaments of the Holy Scriptures in favor of doctrines of paganism, with humanism being the number one doctrine they want to instill in the minds and hearts of the public. Now, here's a quote from page 20 of Rulers of Evil. And this is Tupper Saucy's quote. I felt an overwhelming obligation to love my enemies by studying them in intricate detail. I wanted to know the extent of the Jesuit involvement in the United States government, presently and historically. What I discovered was a vast Roman Catholic substratum of American history, especially the revolution that produced the constitutional republic. Now, I may add this, and this is me speaking, that is a key part of history to really understand who was the mastermind behind the American Revolution and how it was the key to open that door so that the Vatican and the Jesuits could get into America, because they were not liked back then by the Protestants because of their involvement in trying to overthrow England. One reason. Back to Tupper Saucy. I found that the Jesuits played eminent and underappreciated roles in moving complacent New Englanders to rebel against their mother country. I discovered facts and motives strongly suggesting that events that made Great Britain divide in 1776 were the outworkings of an ingenious Jesuit strategy. The strategy appears to have been single-handedly designed and supervised by a true founding father few Americans have ever heard of, Lorenzo Ricci, known to British Jesuits as Lawrence Ricci. In fact, he was the Jesuit general. In fact, investigating Jesuit involvement in the formation of the United States turned up a whole host of hitherto little-known names, such as Robert Bellarmine, Joseph Amiot, the Dukes of Norfolk, Daniel Cox, Sun Tzu, Lord Bute, Francis Thorpe, Nicholas von Hattheim, and the Carrolls, Daniel, Charles, and John. In their way, these men were as essential to our constitutional origins as Jefferson, Payne, Adams, Washington, Locke, and George III. Isn't that an interesting quote? And this was Tupper's research, and you can go back to many, many of my shows, and it gets into Tupper's history, how he was framed for IRS violations. Guess what? He found out the prosecutor was actually a Jesuit priest. So getting into this history of our country is vital. And a lot of those names I mentioned, you never hear about from these supposed great historians out there telling us all about how the revolution took place. How could they leave this out? Unless it's not Jesuit revisionist history. And if the Jesuits control our educational system, they also control what we read. So that's why you don't hear it on the mainstream, and you very seldom even hear it in the alternative media. Now, this is some new information James said he learned from this book. So let's go through that. He said the founder of the Jesuit order, Ignatius Loyola, was initiated into the Illuminati. The Illuminati existed long before Adam Weishaupt founded the Bavarian branch on May 1st, 1776. And the second thing he said he learned, it was Spain and Portugal that the Knights Templars began to call themselves Illuminati. He also learned the basic doctrines of the Illuminati are based on Gnosticism. The Illuminati, Rosicrucians, Freemasons, Jesuits, and the Knights of Malta are groups that evolved from the Knights Templars. The Knights Templars invented modern banking because of the invention of paper money by the Chinese. The banking financial systems of today would not be possible without paper money, which has now advanced further into digital money. Though the gunpowder plot of 1605 was blamed on the Jesuits, and 8 Jesuit priests were executed, King James, and that was the plot to blow up Parliament, which was foiled, King James, who discovered the plot, was in reality a collaborator. The plot gave James his best opportunity to separate loyal and moderate Catholics from the extremists of the plot, which secured England for loyal and moderate Roman Catholicism. The sacrifice of 8 Jesuits was a small price for the Vatican to pay to achieve what they have achieved in England. Now, Shakespearean plays teach pagan Gnosticism much more than biblical truth. Now, if you go way back to some of my shows, I did a whole series on the researcher from England who really got into the fact that Shakespeare didn't write these plays, and they were actually written by Jesuits. That is interesting history, and I tend to think that that man that was right. And wow, what a job he did. So go back to some of my old shows. Just Google Arctic Beacon, Shakespeare didn't write any plays, Jesuits did, or something like that. So also, he learned from this book that the United States of America and its Constitution was founded by Freemasons with a hidden agenda. This is exactly what author Ralph Epperson teaches in his YouTube video, America's Secret Destiny. Also, some Jesuit priests wear plain clothes or the garb of something other than a Catholic priest. They do this for the purpose of infiltration. Some may even become ministers of Protestant churches. And remember, Alberto Rivera was one such Jesuit priest who wore plain clothes and was trained to be an infiltrator until he was saved and told all of these stories. And one of the first places he spoke back in the 80s was at the Tony Alamo ministry. Interesting. And Tony helped him out. Now, he also says, journalist Greg Anthony highlights the work of Tupper Saucy in his book Rulers of Evil, going back to a lost but now found June 20th, 2006 radio interview. My, how time flies. He did with Tupper 2 years prior to his passing, so he has the video there. And let me check the time here. Oh, we have 6 minutes, plenty of time. Imagine what you can get done in such a short period of time. Now, he goes on to say, some of the conclusions and statements in Rulers of Evil are in direct contradiction to what Eric John Phelps says in his book, Vatican's Assassins. Phelps says the writer of Shakespearean plays was Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford. Masonic author Manly P. Hall says Freemason Francis Bacon was the real author of Shakespeare. After reading Hamlet last year, I am inclined to agree that de Vere did not write the plays attributed to William Shakespeare, but more likely Bacon, and perhaps some of his associates did. And if we look at the researcher, his first name was Robert, that I did, we traced many of these plays to a group of Jesuit priests, so we have to also include that. He didn't mention that. Now, he goes on to say, this is James Arndt speaking, I do not recommend anyone to listen to Eric John Phelps anymore or read his book Vatican Assassins. Though he calls Charles Chiniquy one of his heroes, he contradicts him when he says that the Civil War was caused by the North and not the South. Chiniquy quotes Lincoln when he points the finger at the Jesuits and the Roman Catholic Church for inciting the South. Wow, we got a phone call here, and I'll have to take it later. So anyway, the Roman Catholic Church for inciting the South to rebel against the North. Phelps also called George Washington a good Baptist when he was really an Episcopalian, and he called him a godly man, though Washington was a Freemason who did not believe the divinity of Jesus Christ. Phelps gets his facts mixed up, or he has a secret agenda. And also, I might add that he was one of the first to come out and criticize Tupper Saucy, calling him a Jesuit coadjutor. Way back when Eric first came onto the scene in 2001 or 2, and that put up a red flag to me. And also the red flag came in a form, the first place he ever did an interview was with the Spotlight. And that's the old American Free Press, which we know is a controlled opposition paper. So that's what James thinks about Phelps. We'll leave it at that. Okay, I did want to get to those 2 articles. And what I have about 3 minutes left. Okay, in this last 3 minutes, remember I said earlier that the Jesuits are known to be great educators here? Well, I found a little clip. I'm going to play a couple minutes of it here. And it's called The Historical Origins of the Jesuit Order. And it was done by somebody named Guy Caballero. And he says, know your enemy. Let's listen to what he has to say for a few minutes. Okay, know your enemy, he says. Part 37.
The Jesuits expanded quickly around Europe. One of the primary ways in which they went about reclaiming some of the ground that had been lost to the Protestant reformers was to establish schools of education in various locations. They went for control of the information flows, imagining, quite rightly, that by controlling education, they could control knowledge and therefore control the worldviews and mindsets of coming generations. If you go to the Jesuit Boston College website today, you'll see a part where they admit, when in 1547 Ignatius was asked to open a school in Sicily for young men who were not Jesuits, he seems to have seen the opportunity as a powerful means of forming the mind and the soul. To bring people to God, he sought to form those who, in their turn, would form or influence many others. These schools that catered for children of all ages soon spread across the world as part of a covert campaign to turn people back to Rome. The key to it was that, unlike other Catholic institutions, the Jesuit schools actively encouraged Protestant children to enroll. This tactic gave them an opportunity to indoctrinate future generations with the rites, ceremonies, and symbols of Rome. They particularly wanted to target the children of rich and influential Protestant families because they knew that what was taught to them would have a trickle-down effect on the rest of society. Like Jezebel herself, the Jezebel spirit goes for the powerful men who will influence others. Jesuits also sent missionaries to far-flung places in the world like China, placing great emphasis on the importance of assimilating themselves into their culture. By educating themselves on the language and religion of these places, they could become teachers of the people and work their way into positions of influence. They were incredibly committed, hard-working, and disciplined in these tasks, pouring out their lives for the furtherance of their cause. Wherever they went, they consistently compromised their own message with the local pagan practices of the area to get a foothold, just like they'd done in Rome itself. When they returned to Europe from these far-flung places, they brought back with them the occult and pagan ideas that they'd picked up there. In Britain, the Jesuits made use of fifth column tactics. They started filtering into the country in the 1560s, and almost immediately they were found preaching from pulpits.
Okay, he goes on to say that they were disguised as church, Protestant ministers. We'll get into more of that tomorrow. All out of time today. Nice accent with that guy, huh? And we'll talk a little bit more about Jesuit education tomorrow. Back on the Investigative Journal. Have a good evening. Good night.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.